Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think actually last time we were on a Zoom call, you were interviewing me.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot
So,
of my work. Yeah, to help people sort of find their, their content sweet spot, their positioning sweet spot. The two go hand in hand. We can talk about that. You were really helpful for Sue, so the interview with you was perfect. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're turning the tables today, and
Yeah.
putting you in the hot seat, and I think we'll look to get started actually, because
Great.
we're a few minutes in. But just to kind of welcome everyone along, this is the fifth episode of Below the Fold that we've done, and essentially each month. Me as Harry running Unfold, we invite along an expert in their area. And today we've got the fabulous Sonja to talk about content marketing. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into that, finding out what it is, and how we can use it in our businesses to help grow, essentially. Do say hello in the chat if you're watching along live with us today. And let us know what you're hoping to get out of the session. Are you an expert content marketer, or are you just thinking about writing your first blog post? All is welcome, but it'd be really interesting to help us kind of guide the discussion a little bit today. In terms of introductions, for those who don't know me, I'm Harry and run Unfold, which is a digital design and development agency. So we do two things really. One is UX design, creating websites which are easier for people to use and understand. And then we also do web development. So we make websites, do a lot of e-commerce and e-booking websites, particularly from all kinds of sectors: gardening, storage, to private chefs. It's a real mix. But the one thing they have in common often is high growth, and going from very small to very big in a very short space of time, which is one of the things we're hopefully going to be talking about today as well. But that's me. Far more interestingly, Sonja, thank you so much for coming along today. Really, really appreciate it. Would you be able to just start, I guess, by introducing yourself and what it is you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Sonja Nisson, previously Sonja Jefferson. You'll find that as well online. And I help people with ideas, I guess, to find their content sweet spot, and to use that to communicate and market what they do. So most of my clients tend to be a vast range of mainly B2B businesses, who are looking to position themselves properly and looking to get their ideas out in a new way. And often I find the connector between them really is that they've got an idea to share. They've got something that they want to communicate, and their business is built on that. And they've got a real love for their customers and they want to help them, and it's that sort of combination of something to say and that real drive to create value, I guess, for their customers. That's the perfect sweet spot for the kind of work that I do. So yeah, anything from Quartet, as I said before, who are a philanthropic service, through to Fundamentals, who you've been working with as well, who are in the electrical engineering field, through to professional advice firms, coaches and trainers and designers, all sorts really. And I worked for Nationwide Building Society for a while as well. I was their head of content design for a year, so deep inside UX world, in the product design world as well. So I've seen that side of content too, which is fascinating. So
yeah, it always interests me being a kind of UX designer and doing this webinar when we're talking to different kind of disciplines, content marketing. We talked about SEO on previous ones, and actually the interplay between all of these things is so important, and bringing kind of all that together has been really, really interesting. Thanks to everyone who said hello in the chat. I can see Ella, Ellie, and Emma, all the E's in today. Thanks for coming along. I guess my first question then, to sort of kick things off, and one of the things I've sort of noticed from reading on your website and book is valuable content and talking about this idea of valuable content and what the difference between that is and just content, and why it helps businesses to win more business.
Sure, it's a good question, and it's something I've puzzled over for years, as you can imagine. So I think, content is everywhere, isn't it? It's everything that we're interacting with now, especially post-COVID, and a world which is, well, coming back to some real world, but certainly digital first. But valuable content is something different. I mean, it's valuable in the eye of the beholder, the eye of the receiver. So it's kind of supercharged content, if you like. It's something which is the receiver finds relevant, entertaining, useful, helpful in some way. So we can do our best to create it. It's the receiver who will decide whether or not it's valuable to them, and that's the challenge in a lot of ways as well, isn't it? So for a business, for somebody like you, Harry, at Unfold, for the people on the call as well, valuable content is the type of content that will help you grow. When I'm talking about it, the type of content I get really excited about is one, the content that positions you, the message that goes out on the website, but more than that, from a marketing point of view, it's the blogs that you create, the newsletters that you share, the social posts that you put out, and all the rich other ways that you can communicate, and send value to other people. So it could be, video tutorials, it could be a physical book, it could be a multitude of other things, that create value for your audience and help to engage them in your message, pull them towards you, and build trust in what you do. And trust is the basis of selling, isn't it? So that's what we're all looking to do. And without that content, it's much harder. I'm not saying that you can't build trust, but you make the job an awful lot harder. Everybody's going to check you online. If there's nothing there that communicates your expertise in a way that's valuable to them, you've got a harder job ahead of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next question, which follows on really nicely from that, is how do we actually work out what content is valuable, and how do you go about working out what you should be talking about?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it's, there's lots all of us can say, isn't there? But what's going to be valuable, to ourselves and our business. And it's that, if you think of a Venn diagram, I suppose, what you're looking for is, what is the sort of sweet spot between what you want to say as a business and what your particular clients want to hear, what they find valuable from you. And valuable content is found in the sweet spot between the two. So in terms of helping a business to find that, like for Sue, for example, at the Co-Foundry, that's why I was speaking to you before, she has things she wants to say, but what's going to be relevant to their customers? What do they expect from her? What do you, Harry, expect from somebody like Sue as a brand designer? So really spending time listening to your clients, your audience, finding out how they position you in the minds, what they want to hear from you, what they'd find really helpful, alongside the deep work you do, the sort of inner work in a business, to work out what you want to say, is the job of somebody like me, to help people find that sweet spot. And I think, nowadays more than ever, what that means is you've got to really know your customers. I know everybody says that, UX world and otherwise, but yeah, it helps if you can be specific about the type of people that you want to do business with, with the connectors between them, and then you'll have, a rich stream of interesting things to be able to say to them. Because I think, the thing that people fall short on a lot of the time is trying to say everything to everyone, and then your message, your content just falls between the cracks. So the more specific you can be, and the better the people, the customers, the businesses you're trying to do business with, the more likely you are to create something that's going to be valuable to them. And that's the tricky job, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with UX, isn't it? You actually have to go out and speak to people, and I mean, the clue's in the name for UX user. Yeah. You've got to speak to them and find out what they want. But I guess it's the same with content marketing. Like, you've got to be out there proactively finding what it is that your customers want to know about.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. That's the job. And I think we've got so many sources of being able to find that out now. With that part of it can be data related, looking at the analytics, looking at what's working now. But there's also that sort of deep research, like in UX world as well, through asking through surveys, or, you know, like I did with you, some in-depth interviews. You can get so much that way, so much data to be able to provide the evidence you need to make the decisions on what to create, you know. So yeah, that's it. So there's all sorts of examples. I ran Valuable Content, which is an agency, for quite a lot of years, about 20 years. And we had this Valuable Content award scheme that we set up. And it was really just, you know, the early days of content marketing, trying to work out, you know, what examples there were out there in the world for people to get inspired by, you know, all sorts of businesses. And we found businesses from, you know, one-man bands up to HSBC, a specific part of, you know, the bank, the expat services division, that were creating content that was really hitting the mark with their particular customers. And HSBC was a really fascinating one, that expat services division, and it really taught me something, actually, because they were creating, you know, all sorts of things that would help expats around the world, specifically a survey on, you know, the best places to live and work around the world. And it was all user generated, you know, and they had one question which powered their content, basically, and everything that they created. And it was a really user-focused question. And what they asked themselves was, what does somebody moving, it's so simple, what does somebody moving abroad need to know? What does somebody moving abroad need to know? And that one question was, you know, was the link for all of their content. It was the driver for all of it. So yeah, I think for businesses as well, what you're looking for is, what is the unique question that people are asking of you? What can you create to answer that question? So yeah, does that make sense? So it's, you know, what's the question? What's the question you're answering for people? And yeah, that's what I try and find out through interviews with somebody like you.
And I love that approach. Yeah, I love that approach, because it's so targeted. I mean, it seems simple to ask that single question, isn't it? What you need to know to move, but actually so much hangs off of that, and actually reaching that kind of point of value that customers are looking for is so important. I was having a conversation just yesterday, actually, with someone who works for a company which will remain nameless, a marketeer, and their frustration was that the content being produced was done so not because of the quality of actually the content itself, but just because they're trying to hit SEO keywords, or just needed to kind of put out content for the sake of it. And it felt like, well, yes, you're getting the numbers in terms of people are viewing the page, but how, like, what's the interaction and what's the engagement like after they've hit the page, and what are they taking away from that, which is really where I think the piece that you're talking about comes in.
It has to have some meaning, and I think it has to have some sort of passion and drive behind it, because I think, you know, you'll know this, you know, if you receive a piece of content, you can feel it if somebody means it, you know, or whether it's just done for sort of tactical purposes, you know. So yeah, it's a really tricky thing to create, because you've got to have that, it's got to be positioned really well, right in, you know, the sweet spot of what your company does and what your customers want, but you've also got to believe in it. And I think, you know, without that, you know, belief from the company, you know, that real drive to create it, people pick up on the fact that it's just marketing, you know, and then it falls flat. So it's a really, I just find it so fascinating, you know. Yeah, and then you've got to find the time to create this stuff, and that's the other side of it, isn't it? It's like, yeah, and that means believing in the value of it and actually setting aside time to be able to do it, you know, on top of all the work that you do, the project work and everything else. It's a tricky one, but massively rewarding for a business. So yeah, all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly attest to that. We've probably been content marketing for about 12 months, maybe a bit longer. And it's only really after that amount of time that you start to see the value coming from it. But you really do once you've put that time in, but the consistency has to be there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it really does. And I work with Sharon, who I ran Valuable Content with, and we've set up a bit of a side project called the School of Valuable Content. Not that much different at the moment, but one of the things we noticed through COVID was, you know, it takes kind of real clarity and focus to be able to create this stuff. And, you know, in our sort of COVID-y world, people will find it difficult to find the time and the focus for all that deep work that you need to write this stuff or create this content. So we set up content writing clubs as a bit of an experiment once a month, just half a day online, where people could come and we structure their time and give them writing exercises to create this content. Because without that commitment in your diary all the other project work and all the management work on your front and everything else just takes over, doesn't it? So it's just trying to create a space for people, and it's, yeah, it was a bit of an experiment, but it's proved really helpful.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, very, very good idea. Like it's that time in the diary, isn't it, to
Yeah.
set it
Yeah.
aside. If people watching have got questions as we go along, please do put them either in the chat, or there is a Q&A function. We'll certainly be doing some questions at the end, but while we're having discussion, if you want to chip in on something, feel free to kind of to drop in, and we'll answer those questions.
I noticed Emma is a brand strategist and designer, and I think that's really interesting actually from a content marketing point of view. Emma, I hope you don't mind me mentioning you here, but because I've learned that there's sort of two sides of that. Oh, good, she doesn't mind. The two sides of that, you know, the sort of branding coin, and actually, I noticed this with the work with Sue at the Co-Foundry. You know, we're both trying to answer similar questions. I have to answer it from a, you know, what makes this company tick? You know, what's the kernel of your positioning, and around who you're speaking to and what you've got to say to the world. I have to find that to be able to create a content marketing strategy that works for you. Whereas Sue is looking from that sort of pure brand point of view, again, positioning a message, the visual communication of that. And the interplay between brand and what I do on the content field is just totally ingrained. And it almost feels like you need the two, you know, to be able to work together very seamlessly to be able to get this stuff working for people. So, yeah, Emma, I don't know if that connects with you, but yeah, it's very powerful when you get it working together, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Even with UX as well, doing that piece alongside, and we're all kind of asking the same questions, because it defines so much about where you take the rest of the project and the business as a result. So I think that's really, really interesting. My next question actually is, and we chatted about this a little bit before, but what kind of businesses benefit from content marketing? Obviously, you've mentioned you do it primarily B2B, but is B2C, is it relevant or less so?
Oh, it's all relevant, and we're all dealing with people. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, somebody coming through any commerce channel, or a, you know, consumer on a digital channel another way, or you know, business to business. You're dealing with people, and you know, this stuff is around trust, as I said. So it makes not a bit of difference, you know, what sector you're in. This is a human trust building exercise that we're talking about here. So I don't think it has any, there's no difference, you know. It's not at all. So it works for everybody for sure.
Yes. And I guess where would I go next? How do we kind of measure the ROI and the effectiveness of this content? Because that's ultimately what a business is going to want to see from putting this content out there, but it's such a difficult thing to do.
It is, and I think that there's a whole topic on this one itself.
Get stuck
I
in.
think, you know, like all good measurement stuff, you need a mix of leading and lagging measures. So leading measures are the things that lead up to a good result. Lagging measures are the actual result that you want. So you need a mix of both, but it depends what a business wants to achieve through their content marketing. So I did some work for Bristol University way back on their first content strategy, and they had, you know, they're recruiting students, they're taking them from offer through to acceptance, and then acceptance through to start. And when we started looking at the content goals, basically, it wasn't around the recruitment of students. That was fine. It was getting more students to accept an offer that they, you know, so it was a very specific goal that they had in mind. So that was the lagging measure that they needed, was to get more students to accept. And you could measure that. You can measure, you know, the ultimate result of that. But there's leading measures up to that point. So again, engagement in the content itself, you know, positive feedback in the content itself. All of those things were the leading measures that we were looking at. So Yeah, it really depends on the business that you're looking at, but you've got to be really specific in your goal. I think that's the main thing, and then look at the measures that matter on the way to that, because basically what you're trying to do is build raving fans for your business. That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? And that means not just people to buy from you, but people to be loyal, to buy again, and even more than that, to advocate for you. So I think the true goal of content marketing is to create that sort of army of raving fans for Unfold, or for my business, or for the people on the call, so that they advocate and do your marketing job for you. Because if your content is good enough, and you're creating that value and you're delivering that amazing service, then they're going to be going out sharing your content on your behalf. And all of us have limited resources, budgets, marketing functions, all of those things, but if your content is good enough, it becomes part of your business development toolkit 24/7, 365 days a year, and you're actually getting more and more people to spread the word for you. You want people to say, Unfold's content's amazing. You're looking for a new website. You've got to read this. This is the guide that you have to read, and therefore it goes much further. So if that makes sense, that's the ultimate goal for me. It's not just sales; it goes beyond that. It's advocacy. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Actually, the last episode of Below the Fold, we were talking to Ash Phillips about building communities, and very similar conversation around how do you create those super loyal advocates of your business, actually seeing how content has a massive part to play in building up that community around the business as well.
Definitely, yeah. He probably said similar. It's sort of, for me, it's kind of, the core of good marketing is, say good stuff and do good stuff, in order for the community that you serve. So where the content marketing side in is the saying, what is it that you're putting out there, and how can it be relevant to the people that you serve? It is in service, isn't it? Marketing is service.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. We've got a question in the chat actually from Ella, which I'm gonna jump across to. And she's asked, how do you navigate the relationship between SEO/keywords and valuable content that doesn't feel overly manipulated in order to rank? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a really good question. It's something, again, that I've thought about a lot and struggled with over the years myself, Ella, on this one. So yeah, it's a good question to dive into. And my view is always it's human first. So what is the question you're looking to answer for the audience that you serve, and how can you do that in a way that suits them best? Some of the businesses that I work with take SEO very seriously, and as they should. It's a way of expanding the reach of your content, but the best ones will always look at what is it that my particular clients are looking to learn, and how can I communicate that in the best way. It can be that the SEO research that you do helps you to formulate that answer in a way that they'll get, but it's always around their question first. It's never around gaming SEO first of all, if that makes sense. So I mean, obviously keyword stuffing fell by the wayside, I hope, for every business years and years and years ago, because it just feels forced. So if it's not going to read right from a human's perspective when they're reading it through, then change it. It's just even if it would work for SEO, as you said before, getting them to that piece of content, if somebody actually reads and consumes it, it sounds terrible and they'll be off like a shot. So it's got to be a conversation with your particular audience in a way that makes sense for them, and then it's the SEO can inform that, but it's not the driver. It's absolutely not the driver. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and Google is giving more and more kind of weight to content which is well structured, and actually penalizing, I think, where you, like you say, keyword stuffing, but even more so kind of SEO, UX, valuable content, I think is converging into the same, all driving towards the same objective, rather than those being kind of separate nowadays.
Yeah, how cool is that? That's the way it always should have been, and I think, yeah, they're just catching up in some ways, but that's great. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to ask one more question, but if anyone has any kind of further questions to pose to Sonja while we have her, please do so in either the chat or the Q&A. But my question is actually around, okay, once we've produced kind of lots of valuable content, how do we squeeze as much valuable or value out of that as a business as possible? How do we make it go as far as possible?
Oh, can you say that again, Harry? I was just reading a question in the Q&A as well at the same time. And
No worries. Yeah, I was just kind of curious because obviously there's a lot of effort that goes into producing valuable content. How do we squeeze as much value out of the content that we've produced as possible and make it work as hard for us?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it does take an awful lot of effort, doesn't it? It's and I think the temptation sometimes can be, if I've done that, what's the next shiny new thing I can create? But actually, yeah, there's a lot you can do. There's a friend of mine in Holland who looks at creating content a bit like you would do if you were creating something for TV, like an episodal series. And so I think, if we can think a little bit like a Netflix provider in creating a series of content around a particular subject, you're going to be able to squeeze most juice out of that itself. So, it's not sort of random acts of content on many different topics. You're thinking about the themes, the important themes, the episodes, the chapters that your clients, your audience would be specifically interested in, and going deep on those. So you're approaching that in many different ways, and therefore that you can keep producing on that particular topic and keep getting as much value as you can out of it, rather than randomly creating loads of stuff that may or may not give you great value going forward. So I think think about those sort of buckets of content first and foremost.
Yeah. And I guess you can make sure that's going across lots of different channels as well.
Definitely, of course. Yeah. And different channels have their own ways of that they want you to communicate so you can get best out of. But yeah, it's the same themes through each, isn't it?
Yeah. Fantastic. So we've got another question in the Q&A. It says, hi Sonja, are there any tools or techniques you use personally to get into the perspective of your target audience and avoid your own bias?
Great question. I don't know who that's from, but that's a good one. But yeah, I think there's one thing that I use time and time again, and I'm more than happy to share this with people after this as well, which is I call it the sort of valuable content planning template. And it's, rather than just diving into content when our own bias comes into play and we start talking, from our own perspective rather than our clients, it asks some really specific questions to keep it customer focused. Mm-hmm. So, it will ask you, why are you doing this as a business, which is important too. But it also asks you, who is this for? Really, 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 who is this content for? And it says, can you name a dream reader of this, a real person, and keep them front of mind? And then what does that person want to know? What do they need from this content? And then what are the key messages that you want to put out? So I think if you can do that before every piece of content is, think of, yes, why you're doing it, what you want from it, but create a little reader profile, and what they want from this content, and actually name that person. Because I think, the one thing I've noticed over the years, and this will help you on this side, is if you're not motivated to send it to a real person straight after you've created this piece of content, then it's not going to be valuable. It'll fall between the cracks of everybody. So it really helps to keep one real person in mind. And if it's going to be valuable to them, no doubt it will be valuable to other people as well. But it's got to be created with a real person in mind. So if you want that planning tool, I'm more than happy to send it across, send it to anybody on the call.
That would be awesome. We were sending around a recording of the webinar today, and we can definitely include that on there. That would be fantastic. And yeah, very much appreciated. We've got another question. I find it a real struggle to keep up with all the content I want to create. Do you have any advice for organizing and maximizing your content creation output?
Good question. Is that a marketer? I can't see who's.
It's anonymous, but I'm assuming so.
It is really hard. I mean, if you're a marketer in a business, I'm making some assumptions here. You'll be asked by, well, if a business is really up for this, by all sorts of people to create all sorts of things, and it can be completely overwhelming, can't it? And that's where I think the content strategy comes in, because you can't do everything for everybody. So often, if it's feeling massively overwhelming, you can't keep up with the demands from the business. And again, I don't know your situation, then it's time to step back and look at, what's really going to matter to the business and matter to your customers. And, more, less is more in some ways. If you can create a few great pieces of content over the year that are going to be targeted for the people that you want to speak to, then that's better than a massive generalist meh content, if you like. It's so yeah, but I don't know the situation of the person who's asking that question. So I know it is hard, and Harry, for somebody like you running your own business, and being pulled into that content marketing drive as well, how hard that is. And the only way you can do it is to put time in the diary, to value it as much as you do one of the other projects that you've got, and stick to that. Create time on a weekly basis to put time into this stuff, and that's the only way you're going to be able to keep on top of it.
I actually have a question based off on what you were sort of saying there, because one of the things that's really difficult, I think, about content marketing, we talked right at the beginning of this about defining exactly what it is you should be talking about and sticking to your niche, or at least having a very clear idea of what, the content you should be creating.
Yeah.
How do you keep that interesting and varied over time if you're producing content all the time without wandering off into the different areas that perhaps are not relevant to your audience?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I don't think it has to be niche to the point of driving out any sort of creativity around it. It's not, think of that HSBC question, what does somebody who's moving abroad need to know? That opens up a whole raft and avenue of different ways you can go about it. So it's, if it's a website question, how do you create the world's best website? There's many different, I'm not saying that should be yours, but there's many ways you can approach that. So, I think sometimes creativity needs boundaries, isn't it, to be, so you can be as creative as possible within that runway, if you like, but it shouldn't be stifling. So the question should be so small that it drives out interest and creativity in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it actually can make you more creative than trying to create a generalist stuff for everybody, for every different question. But I think you can wander off as well a little bit. It doesn't have to, it's just overall, over time, it's you're the question that you're answering for people, and they know that, so they'll come to you for it.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think that seems to be all the questions that we've got today. And I'm conscious of time, so I just want to say a massive thank you again for joining us today. It's been such an interesting and detailed discussion. Hopefully lots to take away. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to all of you. I'll send over that planning sheet as well. But drop me a question. You've got me a question if you.
Awesome. Oh, we've got a last minute entry which we'll sneak in. Emma, well done. How do you balance the volume of content without overwhelming the audience?
That's a good question again, because you feel it, don't you? If I get emails on a daily basis from somebody, and I just switch off. So it's a really good question. I think more is not often better. Less is more, as I said before. So again, you can check in with your audience and ask what's most relevant to them. How often would they like to hear from you, and go from that side. So again, it depends on the channel, doesn't it? Twitter, you can be more frequent, I think, than LinkedIn. I will switch off from people who are just bombarding me on LinkedIn, for example. So know your channel and know your audience, and do ask people, whether it's too much, what they'd like to hear from. So I'd do a bit of research on that.
Brilliant, fantastic advice. Thank you so much. So in terms of Below the Fold, we're actually taking a summer break. So this is our last episode before hopefully everyone's off on some lovely summer holidays this year. But we will be back in the autumn. So watch this space. We'll obviously be promoting that on our social channels in the appropriate manner and amount, depending, to make sure no one's overwhelmed. Yeah, watch this space. We'll be back with another series of events in the autumn. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you all there. Thanks for coming along. Thank you, Sonja.
You're welcome. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, everyone. We'll catch you next time.